Welcome back. Today's podcast is 12 profit-killing bad habits that you must stop now. Now, these are some, you basically use these bad habits that Julie and I rattled off as a checklist. And check yourself against these things on a regular basis. Maybe write these things down. Or better yet, if you're a Harris Real Estate Daily subscriber, just go and print these notes out that are exclusively available to our newsletter subscribers. Print the notes out from today's podcast and use these to check yourself against. Julie and I use these exact notes for Zoe, and we obviously modified them for a 10-year-old, but we've used these notes and we put them in her actually in her bathroom, and she can actually look at these things. I'm not saying she actually reads them, but at least makes us feel like we're being good parents.
It's a good thought. So some of these do apply to you, and some of them you can just cross them off and say, nope, I've already conquered that. So that's great. Monitor yourself at all times to squash the detrimental bad habits, because successful people know to avoid those bad habits and actively work to replace them with success habits. And I'm sure you've heard, we both have for many, many times on different coaching calls, different iterations of these with not just 10-year-olds, but certainly adults and people in business. We hear this from time to time, and sometimes one of these will get you just when you're tired or, when you have slow business. So monitor yourself. Number one is what we call lack of stick-to-it-ness or stick-to-it-ness. And I wrote down the word focus, F-O-C-U-S, that stands for follow one course until successful. Remember the jet analogy? We say stop taking off and landing the plane before achieving cruising altitude, right? So when you're in a jet, I think most of you listening have flown many times probably.
Oh, you're going to give the analogy?
Oh, I'm going to ramp it up and you can clean it up
All
if
right.
you need to. So you're sitting on the runway, right? And you're getting ready to take off. I'm going to ask you, when in the takeoff, cruising altitude, and landing, does the jet use the most fuel?
So back to what Julia was just saying. She set it up perfectly. It's even better. You're the pilot of the plane. And your job, obviously, is to make sure everything's loaded. Everybody's, ready to take off. Everything's situated as it should be. The runway is the runway. You know what you have to do to actually clear the runway. You have to throttle down with as much energy as you possibly can. And your goal, and Julie just gave you the question, when do people use the most, or when do jets use the most fuel? The obvious answer is they use it at takeoff. But here's what a lot of people do in life. Not just, hopefully your next jet isn't going to do this, but this is what a lot of humans do. They will get ready to get started. They'll have all their ducks in a row. They'll have everything as they think they should have it. And then what happens is they actually start out a lot of times with really good momentum, and then they stop themselves. Because what happens when a plane is taking off? As it runs to the end of the runway, you're going to have to, hold down a little bit. You're dealing with a lot of G-forces. The plane starts to rattle and roll. The things that weren't secured, correctly are now becoming unsecured. The whole thing. I mean, if you think about it, the most, challenging time for anyone that doesn't like flying, like my dear wife, Julie, is at takeoff. And so takeoff is where, where you will reach a peak of potential flight anxiety. That is the exact same point where a lot of people just give up. And I want you to think about this. So you're getting ready to get started in any aspect of, your life. Maybe you're wanting to start a workout routine, lose weight. Maybe you're trying to, learn new skill sets. You become a listing agent. Doesn't matter what it is. A lot of people give up before they even have cleared the end of the runway. Now, here's what happens when you do clear the end of the runway. You actually still have to use a lot of fuel, but it gets smoother. Remember, as soon as you're out of the runway, the plane starts to smooth out. Maybe you can, the lights change and you can use the bathroom and whatever, right? And then where the plane is going is cruising altitude. Now, the nice thing about cruising altitude, and pilots, you can correct me on this, is the pilot actually can pull back on the throttle. The plane uses less fuel. The plane, passengers are more comfortable. It's not as loud. It's not as obviously, hopefully you're not hitting too much turbulence. Turbulence will come, and the pilot will have to, essentially change the direction of the plane by increasing altitude or decreasing altitude or even going on a completely different, course. But the moral of the story is once you're at cruising altitude, for the most part, things get easier. It takes less energy. It takes less thought. The plane probably puts it on autopilot and comes out and, flirts with the stewardesses or,
It
stewards.
freaks me out when the pilot comes out and chats it up with the flight attendants.
Exactly. So, there it is. And now what happens if say, for example, rolling this back to life, right? So you now have built your real estate business. You are now at cruising altitude. You've weathered the storms and the, turbulence of getting to altitude. You're cruising along. You're not having to put in as much effort. And let's just say you've reached your real estate magic number. You're making consistent income. Things become easier again. In the stages of learning, you would be at probably the conscious competence phase. And so you're having to still put in some effort, but for the most part, it's so much easier than it was when you were, just thinking about getting ready to get started, let alone dealing with actually breaking the bonds of gravity to try to climb to altitude. You following me, listeners? Now, if you decide you want to, in real life, go to the next level. Let's say it's easy for you now to pay all of your bills. You've accomplished a level of competence, and you want to maybe buy another home. Maybe you want to upgrade your home. Maybe you want to do maybe financial. You want to start paying for your kids' college education, or you want to whatever it is. You simply have to earn more money. It's easy. You just start putting in more throttle, and the plane will go to the next level. The next, essentially it'll go from 30,000 feet to 40,000 feet. And in real estate, that means going from, say, for example, having 3 listings at all times or 4 listings at all times to having 5 or 6 listings at all times. All of this is explained in our real estate treasure map, which you get when you subscribe to Premier Coaching, which the first month is free. So in the treasure map, all of you who are joining Premier Coaching and all of you who are in Premier Coaching, make sure you go back and you update your treasure map at least twice a year so that you can then adjust accordingly, because the number of listings you need at all time or your real estate magic number actually changes depending on the market conditions. I give you a lot of information, but hopefully what you realize is there's a proven path to follow as you're on your own personal ascension in life and in business.
Very well put. And to summarize that, it stands for focus. Follow one course until successful. Remember the jet analogy. All right. Bad habit number 2, never mastering the basics. Hiring a team before mastering your management skills, being able to manage what you're asking them to do because you have mastered it. This is a big problem. People get a little bit of success in real estate. Now I got to go build a team. And that makes you set up to settle for subpar performance with your listings and buyer interactions. And, it's because you avoided self-improvement, skill improvement due to perceived expertise or the simple pressure of having to build a team.
So delegate. Yes, delegate. Tim and Julie are not saying don't delegate, but don't abdicate. What does
abdicate mean?
Exactly. So you think back to like when the king or queen gives up their throne, it's abdication. They're giving up their power. And that's what, unfortunately, not just agents, but business people in general do. Well, everyone does, right? You'll delegate something to somebody, but you're not holding them accountable to the results. Why aren't most agents holding people accountable to results? Because they don't know what the work actually entails. The best example is all of you, especially those of you in teams who have never actually learned how to over the phone prospect, who hire ICAs, who are now actually making calls for you. You don't know whether or not they're good or bad. You don't know how to help them improve. You don't know what to expect from them. You don't know what the ratios should be of calls to contacts to appointments set. So you just basically suffer the lack of knowledge because you've never done it yourself. Oh, you read a book or somebody told you exactly what the results should be. Do you know if they ever actually did the work themselves? If you're having, for example, someone that you've hired to call FSBOs for you, have you ever called FSBOs? Would you actually know how to listen to the FSBO call and know how to really help and coach that person to perform at a higher level? Nope.
Yeah, and so that means you're subject to that VA or whoever that you hired who's supposedly prospecting and setting appointments for you. When they say, well, all the leads suck, you're going to believe them because you don't know how many people they're even calling, what their ratios are, what scripts they're using, if they're any good at the scripts, if they're bothering to close, or any of the following. So be careful about never mastering the basics before you go and basically abdicate all of your, some of that comes down to a lot of expenditure, churning more and more and more leads because it must be a leads problem.
Well, they think that the race, again, a lot of inexperienced, non-business people getting into real estate, and then they hit with all these pressures to form a team. And then the next thing they're, listening to some team building guru who is telling them to just add this team member, this team member, this team member.
Yep.
And they have lost contact or maybe never even had clarity on why they got in the real estate business in the first place. Here, I'll help you guys to, find your baseline. Here it is. The product of your real estate business is profit. No real estate practice or team actually gets sold. So the only benefit, the only long-term benefit you're going to derive from all the turmoil and all the, strife that you have in just being a business owner is going to be the profit that you make from your business, because with that profit, you get to reinvest it. And then with that reinvesting, you will become rich. And rich is merely where your money works for you and you no longer have to work for your money. Yes, I'm talking about real estate. I'm talking about dividend paying stocks. Obviously, you have other, wealth accelerators if you're in EXP Realty, for example, revenue share. But please listen to what we're telling you, because the older you get, assuming you survive the years in the business, the more you're going to wish you would have actually built a profit first business, because you would have then obviously had the opportunity to have created more passive income for yourself. That becomes so incredibly powerful the older that you get. Trust me on that one.
Yes, very well said. All right, bad habit number 3, believing in false wealth myths. Examine your core beliefs about wealth. We've done entire podcast series about how are you thinking about money. Shift away from scarcity to abundance, the abundance mindset, and seek exposure to ethical wealth building practices.
Here's the problem with the whole abundance versus scarcity mindset. It has absolutely been, I'll tell you the word I was thinking in my head, bastardized by people trying to sell mindset products.
Yes.
Because what they do is they'll tell you that you should buy their whatever widget. Otherwise, you have a scarcity problem. And who the hell wants to have a scarcity problem, right? So they'll talk about one of the best things you should always be investing in is yourself. And that's the abundance mindset. They're just giving you a sales pitch, right? So if you want to learn how to build wealth, learn how to build wealth from people who have built wealth before, not people who have learned how to sell mindset books. Okay? Exactly. Read what Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger say. I'll tell you, Tony Robbins has got a really great, like a 10 out of 10 series of financial books.
Yes.
I think he just came out with one maybe a month ago that you absolutely should read. If you want me to cliff note it, I'll give it to you right now. Ready? Here it is. Vanguard index funds. There, that's it. Buy Vanguard index funds.
That's the cheat code.
Yes, and if you want to know which one, I'll tell you. And remember, not financial advisors, but VOO. I think that's right. That is the S&P 500 Vanguard index fund. It has one of the lowest carrying costs, and you will get on average over 10%. There it is. I just solved the Rubik's Cube of financial wealth building for you. And also, if the numbers make sense, real estate is absolutely a killer investment, especially in this era of inflation, which is obviously a long-term, I'll even call it a trend.
Yes, well, this is quoted always about the same. That somebody who is a homeowner has roughly 40 times the wealth as somebody who's renting. And that's just one example. We've done podcasts on that as well. So,
since you mentioned this, when they say that, like, you'll hear people that say buying a home is a bad idea. Those are the same people that are trying to get you to hypothetically use the money that you would have been using to buy a home with your down payment, to buy whatever it is that they have for sale, which is probably stocks, bonds, or expensive vacations.
Or they're saying that because they themselves are not buying a house for whatever reason.
And let's just go on down this rabbit hole. There's a lot of people that think real estate should be socialized, and ownership itself is somehow, wrong. Ownership of anything.
Don't get us started. Okay. All right. All of this is related to bad habit number 4, focusing on liquidity events. Prioritize consistent savings over one-time windfalls. Adopt disciplined saving habits. Our coaching clients know that they're supposed to have their money set up to be saving a minimum of 10% off of each and every single commission check. Many of them are saving routinely 20 to 30% off of every check because they don't have crazy expenses. But you and I can probably count on one hand people that we know who became wealthy not doing it incrementally, investing it, saving it, and then investing it a little bit at a time, that had, as your dad used to say, the big eagle flyover.
And those people who did have liquidity events from selling companies or whatever, guess where they put their money? Oh, I know, Vanguard index funds.
Yes.
To a person, that's where they put it. So do what they'll do it, essentially is going to be essentially the proven path for not just wealth preservation, but additional wealth creation. But really, Julie's point is like, again, we tell coaching clients this, but you and I always, we've lived by this rule too. Life is about a series of base hits. Don't look for home runs.
Yes.
If a home run occasionally shows up in your life, which is extremely rare, be grateful for it. But really, your mission every day should be to get your ass out of the dugout and at least get up to base. Whether you hit the ball or not, at least you swung.
And you've improved your skills because you bothered to swing.
It's really, I guess, this is something else that I wish frankly, you and I knew 33 years ago when we got married. Everything in life worth having, it's going to take more effort, more frustration, and takes a hell of a lot more time than anyone told you. Like all these people that are trying to preach you this, anything that even resembles get rich quick or something that's going to be,
easy button-ish.
Right, with no pain, they're lying to you. Just assume, unless proven otherwise, they're just trying to sell you something that frankly won't work, right? So just the realization is everything in life worth having is going to take longer, require more effort. And so just be the disciplined, focused person that accomplishes the goal. Make sure you're the one that gets up to cruising altitude.
Exactly. All right. Bad habit number 5. And this we do see a lot with coaching clients. Thinking that you had to be born with some kind of magical sales talent. Instead, it's the perseverance, the skill, and service that surpass raw talent. Somebody who has lots of even nervous energy and enthusiasm and excitement that has a level of skill but is improving their skill is always going to do better than somebody who goes in and just wings it. So don't believe that if you're just not a natural salesperson,
you're setting us up here for this.
Forget it.
I know what you're doing. Julie's trying to set me up to rant on DISC, and I'm going to avoid it too much. But it is important you guys understand. And the reason that this is something that, so Julie and I are believers in the DISC personality test as a tchotchke, as a tool.
It's a tool, not a diagnosis.
It's not science. It's pseudoscience. Pseudoscience means fake science. So there are no real distinct personality styles. You don't fall into a particular, you're not a DIS or a C, right? It's just essentially
it's a guide.
It's a valuable guide that you can use to be a little bit introspective and help you to be more communicative and frankly get along with other people. But to believe that it's actually real science is an absolute lie. So make sure you're opening your mind to the fact that if you took the DISC test and it said you're an analytical personality type, and analytical personality types are best for being clerks and accountants, and here you find yourself in the real estate business, and now you wanted to be a real estate agent, you wanted to be successful, but this damn DISC test said you aren't cut out to be a salesperson. Please don't believe the bullshit.
Don't do that. And we've had people come to us and say, oh my gosh, I just came from this thing and they said that I'm not a driver and I don't know if I can be a salesperson and I don't know, maybe I'm not for this business. It can really mess with people's heads. That's what I don't like about it.
Right. And that's unfortunately the way a lot of it's being taught, is as if it were an actual rule book, which is it's preposterous. And if you really want to have some fun with this topic, because Julie and I have researched this, we actually were going to write a book. Our last book that we wrote, Harris Rules, the editor made us remove it. I think I would say kindly,
unsuggested
it. Well, we did some research finding out the history of the DISC test, and it is preposterous. You really should, if you're looking for a real, a look down, what is it, the Alice in the Wonderland?
Oh, the rabbit hole?
Yeah, if you want to really see how something can go from just sort of an obtuse idea into something that becomes mainstreamed and to the point where it's almost believed to be, the law, like gravity or whatever, just read the history of DISC. It all started in the 60s. That should tell you all the things you need to know. Point number 6,
exactly.
Julie.
All right, point number 6, and this is one that we often can and do go on about. Buying success instead of earning it. You're supposed to be investing in developing your skills, not just throwing money at leads. So let me ask you something, Tim. Is it better to have a whole bunch of leads that I'm just buying and running that ratio? Because those companies usually say, well, you should expect a 1 or 2% conversion and you just need more leads and you need more dripping time. You need more double opt-in pages and you need to do this for a longer time. Or is it better to have fewer but better leads?
Well, Julie's obviously setting me up the answer, right? If you guys hear that noise in the background, we apologize.
Sorry. They're working on the office.
That's right. So to answer your question, Julie, obviously the answer is to have fewer leads. The reason that agents are sold into having lots of leads is because the people that are trying to sell you lots of leads are the CRM companies that are trying to sell you CRMs and the lead selling companies that are trying to sell you leads. So if you knew that the goal is to have fewer pre-qualified leads, what would they have to sell you? You guys get it? What you should learn to do and be the absolute master of. If you want to know a skill that is going to be for you, if you listen to what I'm telling you now, the most valuable skill you can have, it's learning how to pre-qualify at a high level. And I'll give you permission for something, and I want you to seriously consider this. If you have somebody show up in your life and they don't meet all your pre-qualifying questions, use our scripts that's included in Premier Coaching. All the questions have already been, thought through and tested. So just use the scripts in Premier Coaching. If you have somebody that does not meet the qualities or essentially the guidelines, do not work with them. Now, if you want to put them in a drip campaign, go for it. But chances are, statistically, nothing will ever come from that lead. Why do you want to go about having a rigid approach to pre-qualifying? Because you're going to no longer, frankly, have a false sense of security from having a bunch of leads. We've talked to agents before who think it's like they're winning when they have hundreds, if not thousands of leads in their CRM. And they're not. They're thinking, well, if I drip on these people long enough, one of them is actually going to raise their hand and buy a transaction or buy a house. Well, statistically, you're right. I mean, if you have 1,000 people in a list, we know that statistically, 100 of them or 50 of them might transact in a particular 12 months, but it doesn't mean they're going to transact with you. What makes you think you're the only ones that have those people in the CRM? And so on and so on. So make sure when you have leads, you learn how to pre-qualify them. And I'll give you advanced coaching. If they're not going to transact with you, now listings might be a little bit more, especially in a market like this, but if they're not in a position to buy or sell with you in 90 days or less, those are not people that you should have in your life, because you're going to end up spending time with people that will probably never transact with you. There are enough people out there that want to buy or sell today. Look for those people. That's how you're going to help more people and make more money, and frankly, get a lot of your time and energy back and motivation.
Well, especially with the pressures they have on the buyer side becoming more professional and more complicated, you have to do a higher level of pre-qualification than you ever had before.
But Julie, do you realize the whole, essentially the buying buyer leads in particular, and we talked about this in the last 3 days of podcasts, go back and listen to them. The whole industry of selling buyer leads to agents, I personally think towards the end of this year, it's going to have to be completely retooled.
I know, and we didn't even talk about the TCPA stuff, which we're saving for a future podcast. That's a whole other can of worms. Okay.
Right. Well, I mean, I know you have your time constrained, but the reality of it is that there's every reason to believe that the agents that have the skill sets to actually have meaningful pre-qualifying questions with prospective buyers and sellers are going to be the only agents left standing in the next 12 months. And all the lower skilled agents who've just been buying their leads and using passive systems to hopefully make that, buyer lead into an actual transaction, those agents are going to be experiencing so much stress and they don't even understand why. And again, I have to tell you this. We read the NAR 100-point FAQ. We've read the guidelines as much as, frankly, we can understand them. And it does appear that you're going to have a formalized agreement with every buyer you're working with. Working with, from what we read, includes dripping on them new listing information. So if you have a CRM with a bunch of people in it that you do not have a formalized agreement with, based on what Julie and I have researched, and again, please share with us any cutting edge information you have, but we do believe if you work with those people without an agreement and your CRM continues to drip information on them, you might indeed be in violation of the guidelines.
Well, that's because that falls under the, as you said, quote, working with a buyer. And this all gets down to definitions and legality, and we're not attorneys, and all this is being interpreted as we go, right? As you guys go. And so what constitutes working with a buyer? It specifically says showing property, and it specifically says searching for property for them, which a drip campaign would fall under. Again, I'm not an attorney. You're not an attorney. All of this is going to be subject to scrutiny, but I wouldn't want to be dependent on any of that.
Well, it's because what's going to most likely happen is the way this is going to unfortunately unravel is that there will be attorneys a year from now, mark my word, August of 2025, who are going to be, because there are going to be fines associated with each violation. So if you have a CRM, this is like your worst case scenario, but I want all of you to be prepared for worst case scenario. If you have a CRM with 1,000 people and you're still dripping on them and you don't have agreements with them, I am going to guess, based on what we have read, that you might be liable to pay individual fines for every one of those people that you gave actual listing information to. I want you to really lean into your broker, lean into your MLS, find out what you should be doing.
And we'll update you as we get more knowledge on this. All right, point number 8, or bad habit number 8, procrastination and or blaming others for lack of success. Now, this is an easy one to cure. You just have to memorize 2 phrases. And I personally use these all the time, especially on Mondays, especially at about 6 o'clock in the morning.
That's when she's getting up to take Zoe to school.
On a Monday with a big Monday schedule in front of me and podcasts to do and all the rest. Okay, so here are the 2 phrases to memorize. I'm a doer. I do things now. I get things done. Say that 10 times in a row and good luck procrastinating. The other thing to own your success and not blame others is if it's meant to be, it's up to me. It's not up to interest rates. It's not up to your broker. It's not up to how much inventory it is or how you feel today. If it's meant to be, it's up to me. I am in control of those things. So watch the procrastination. We did a podcast about 2 weeks ago called What Are You Waiting For? And that was all about procrastination.
Point number 9.
Chasing perfect balance. Oh, here we are in the woo-woo end of things. Again, passion, skill, and implementation trump balance. Now, we could talk about balance and the myth of balance forever, but the goals in 5 areas of life that you get in the treasure map change and are never in perfect balance. You know, some of you guys listening have a newborn right now that's screaming in the background while you are trying to listen to a podcast. And do you feel perfectly balanced right now?
We don't, because we're hearing the drill go off in the background. Exactly. And we told the worker not to do it while we're doing the podcast, but there you go.
Proof that it's a live podcast.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, so we're going to move on to number 11. Being addicted to media and doom scrolling. Not that any of you do that. Limit your exposure to negative influences. Practice a media-free life, at least a media-free morning. And focus on the things that you can curate, the things that you want in your mind that are going to help you move forward in life, like this podcast, like I'm sure some other podcasts that you have in your lineup. But watch what you're putting into your head.
Did you see the TVs on at the gym this morning?
Yeah.
Yeah, I glanced up at them and watched them. There was no audio. I just watched it. I literally felt my IQ drop by 10 points.
I know, it's terrible
After
stuff.
like 3 minutes. It was such unbelievable, complete garbage. All the headlines and the blah, blah, blah. I cannot believe people actually... It's just a habit, basically.
It's terrible. I mean, I don't even know how to use a remote control. So what's the point of watching?
Well, you know how to use a remote control, but in our house, we have one TV, and the only thing that works on it is Apple TV, and there are no TV stations. It's basically Netflix.
Like tell me to find some kind of network media. I couldn't do it. So
yes.
Yeah, just step away from that. All right. Last but not least, and we could go on with more, but these are the top bad habits. Lack of urgency. Do you actually practice, for example, furiously fast lead follow-up? Or is your voicemail always full? That's one of my pet peeves. An agent will reach out to us. I need help with more leads. And we call to follow up and your voicemail's full. Well, probably there's leads in there.
Or not set up.
Or it's not set up. So lack of urgency. And this also, it's not just lead follow up, although that's the most obvious spot. But, you know, I had a coaching client tell me that the reason they took a listing was that the seller said to them, you were the only one who called me back within 24 hours of me leaving a message that I wanted to list my house. The other two agents hadn't even called them back yet.
We did hundreds of transactions.
Because we had urgency.
Because we had urgency. And they'll tell you that. If you're a new agent listening right now, you're going to know how to kick the butt of the seasoned agent that has dominated a particular market for a long period of time. Just call people back really quick.
And answer your phone in the first place.
And show up on appointments. Be a little bit early. Follow our rules that we should teach you guys in Premier Coaching. Now I'm going to give you a bonus point, okay? Sure. This is point number 13, and there's 2 others, but those points are going to be waiting for you when you subscribe to Harris Real Estate Daily. And this is another one, which frankly I'm beginning to see starting to make its way out of the societal zeitgeist.
What's that?
Follow your passion.
Oh, yes. If you follow your passion, the money will come.
Right. Have all of you heard that? Julie and I are in our early 50s, and we heard that starting probably in the mid-90s, or really started to really become popular, maybe even in the late 80s. You'd see posters everywhere. Follow your passion, and everything will happen after you follow your passion. You know what? I cannot think of a bigger lie than that. Honestly, I can't. And that's when it's going back to like all these other things, these mindset-y things that people have internalized as being, truisms of life. Follow your passion is horrible advice, because guess what happens? You might start out by following your passion for, let's say, basket weaving. And you might get into it and realize that you're the best basket weaver ever. But turns out no one wants to buy a basket that you've woven that is priced in such a way that you're actually making a profit. So you follow the hell out of your passion. You've done a real good job at that, even produce a superior product, but there's no market for it. There's no business for it. Or let's say you have passion for something and now all of a sudden you have to do it in order to pay your bills. Julie's an example of this with regards to music.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I always wanted to play as a professional musician in a really great orchestra. And, I would say I became a good amateur, and I had a lot of great experiences. But one thing that really hit me was when I was starting to play amongst people who did it for a living, that they were actually a little bit bitter about it. Not all of them, but some of them would say, gosh, I can't believe I have to go do this concert and I have to do this and that. Here's the thing. We all had passion about music, But when you are being paid to do music, guess what? You have to play things sometimes you don't like. You have to show up. You have to do it for a living, which takes away from your passion.
When you hear people that have not really thought through the ramifications of offering advice about follow your passion, those people are like, I just
What's lazy advice, I think.
It is, but it's also, here's the problem, is that what happens is when people become really successful and they're up on a stage, for whatever reason, they think that they're supposed to somehow make it like they have some sort of magical, mystical, energy that just the universe brought them everything they wanted. You hear all these sort of, Richard Branson, I think, when I hear him talk, he's even trying to dress like Buddha or something. God bless Richard Branson. What I'm trying to express to you guys is that when they say follow your passion, they might feel that and believe that's true, but there's zero chance that they were feeling passion as they were building. Here's what happens. When you are at the unconscious competence phase, or you're at the peak of your skill set, when you're at the best at the best of the best as a real estate practitioner, your mental, emotional, and by the way, financial state totally changes. And so how you actually feels a little bit like passion, but it's not. See, passion is a fleeting result, or a fleeting emotion. And if you're predicating your success of life on emotion that you feel for a very short period of time, you're never going to get anywhere. That's the reason we see people in real estate. I got into real estate and I had passion for it, and then I don't have my passion, no, I'm going to go off to do something else. We heard this. This was very common amongst people that never accomplished anything meaningful in their life. Well, I tried going to the gym, but I had passion for it for 6 months. I lost my passion, so now I'm going to try yoga, or now I'm going to try something else. That pattern in life never allows you to get your plane off the ground. You never actually reach cruising altitude. You're never willing to push through the buffeting, the wind shear, the rattling and the rocking of the plane.
It makes you a better person.
Exactly. Guys, so trust us. When we were telling you that everything in life worth having takes longer, requires more effort than anyone will tell you, because probably they don't know either. But that is the truth. And you have to stick to it. And real estate is frankly one of the perfect vehicles for long-term wealth creation. I would imagine that aside from, frankly, if you're a real good AI engineer or entrepreneur right now, you probably have some, bright roads ahead. Mm-hmm. But real estate and the real estate industry, because of all the changes, I'm more encouraged. I'm more optimistic about the future for all of you than, frankly, I've ever felt. I've never felt this optimistic for the real estate industry in more than 2 decades, because of all the things, because of the enormous demand, because the enormously increasing demand from all the baby boomers and all the generation. This is the generation.
All of the numbers are on your side.
All the things, right?
All of the things.
Yes, and so you are in the right place at the right time. So do not fall prey to woo-woo. Do not fall prey to shortcuts. Believe in yourself. Don't think your success is dependent on a personality style. Yeah. All of this stuff. Just focus on like the advice you would have gotten from your grandma, right? Remember grandma? She gave you practical, tactical advice.
Stick to your knitting.
That's right. That's what Julie and I are doing. And become really, really good at, really a few things that pay really, really well.
Important things.
Exactly.
Choose well.
Choose well. And you're in real estate. So go you, right?
Exactly.
All right, Julie, what is tomorrow's podcast?
We're going to do some Ask Me Anything.
Okay, cool. All right. Yeah, that's a good opportunity. Mm-hmm. If you want Julie and I to answer any of your questions, last week we had a lot of questions about the commission sharing lawsuit, so we made it all about that. But if you have any questions you'd like to submit to us about just about anything, honestly, we're encouraging you to send us anything that's even maybe a little irreverent. Those are always fun.
How should they submit those?
Well, I love asking Julie questions during the podcast. That makes her squirm. You guys can hear it in her voice. It's a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but the easy button is just to text me directly at 512-758-0206, 512-758-0206, or you can just message us on Instagram, and we're at Tim and Julie Harris. In the meantime, have a fantastic day. We'll talk with you on the show tomorrow.